Hey y'all. If you're new here, my name's Hugh. I'm a seminary student. I surrendered to the ministry um, almost 2 years ago. I'm going to make this quick, but I wanted to come on here and just give my stance on this passage in 1 Timothy 3:2 and highlight right there what's highlighted. The husband of one wife. I'm going to tell y'all what I think about this being a scripture. If this scripture is actually saying that someone who has been divorced is not eligible to lead a church. And I'm pretty confident in my stance. My stance is like it's pretty clear. That's what Paul is saying. Um, One of the reasons I think that that's a pretty obvious stance is because actually the same reason I'm making this video is I was doing uh, I was going to do a theological discussion with my seminary, and all the other people who were entered into it quit whenever it changed from a theological discussion to a debate. I don't know the reason. I don't even know who was entered, but I know that it's a lot easier to defend the idea of pastoral, like divorce, being okay in a conversation than it is whenever you're reading the scripture and have to pull up the Greek. So it's gonna be a quick video. I'm off the clock now, but I'm working, and I just needed to. I've been doing the same thing for multiple hours all day, and it's killing me. So I just needed to do something. So this is going to be sloppy. There's going to be a lot of ums and hms, and I'm just going to be talking. I'm not going to be providing any sort of like, oh, this is why I think this. I'm just telling y'all what I'm just rambling. So I should make a more formal teaching video on this eventually, but honestly, I'm just annoyed that this debate didn't happen. I studied for a couple hours every day for months and really just found what was biblical. I didn't start with an opinion. I didn't start with this opinion. I didn't have this thought until studying for months and months and finding what God says. So, like I said, I think it's very obvious uh, what Paul is saying. So let me tell you why people think that um, that Paul is not saying that here. He also says it in. It also comes up in writing to Titus. But anyway, the reason what people say is they say, oh well, God, Paul is not saying like one woman ever. He's saying a one woman at a time. He's giving an attack on um, he's attacking polygamy and what's it, monogamous relationships, polygamous relationships. Anyway, he's attacking like polygamy and people who are married to multiple people, and I think that's bogus. I think that's a very cheap um, interpretation, very weak. One of the reasons I just came to mind first. There's so I've put so much time in this. There's a huge list, but first thing, like I just tried recording this a second ago and it didn't work, and I was talking about something totally different. And now this is the first one that comes to mind, um, and it's not there. Oh, one of the reasons I think that this is a ridiculous interpretation of the scripture is that it wasn't an interpretation of the scripture until very recently. Why is it so? Like, I'm Protestant, so I can't say, oh well, like it makes a little less sense for me to say like, oh well, this is what the early church fathers said, so it can't be wrong because I see them disagreeing all the time, so I'm not going to go on here and say like, oh, because the church fathers said it, I'm going to say it. But all the way from there, 60, you know, 60 AD is time period this was being written, and then 90 AD there's church father writings like a lot, and then from then just very consistent agreement on this topic up until 100 years ago or less. Just a little less than 100 years ago, people started to disagree on this. That's almost 2,000 years. And the only reason people started to disagree on this, except for like the Mormons and the Muslims who wanted to marry a bunch of people, or I guess it was the leaders, but the reason that this was a disagreement then is because divorce started to become a normal thing. But that wasn't the case among Christians. Christians, it was never okay in the eyes of a Christian. And this interpretation, it was always just clear among people uh, writing on this that the husband of one wife meant someone who's not been divorced. I'm not saying that I think that people who are pastoring a church or out planning churches who have been divorced are bad at what they do, and that they're not. I'm not saying that they're doing harm to the kingdom or not benefiting the kingdom. Like there's people coming to salvation. There's people growing a relationship with God because God can use broken situations, especially if you're doing it for Him. But I am saying that they're not qualified, and if you're not qualified, then you're not called. Um, Next thing that comes to mind is, oh man, what is it? There's so many things. I just thought of four at once. Okay, I'll go with the death thing because I'm really fixated on this. I don't think people realize that it's also pretty clear in Scripture that death is the only thing that severs the marriage bond. I also want to say that there is some exceptions, very rarely. Let's hit on this first. One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that if you are a believer and you are not, most divorces in a Christian circumstance are the man's fault. Because if the wife leaves, the majority of the Christian divorce situations are the second one, but the first one that we more commonly like pick up on and realize it's happening is infidelity, right? Cheating and stuff. The second one, which happens a lot more, but people don't pick up on it, is the woman leaving because she just wants to, right? She likes this other guy or whatever. That if she's a Christian, right? If you were a good leader and this woman is a Christian and you married a Christian, that won't happen. The only reason that would happen is if you were not being a good leader. That I mean, if you are being the husband that God has called you to be and you're with a Christian woman, then you aren't doing a good job at leading her, and that the reason y'all got divorced was because you weren't doing your job right. And that's a hard thing to say, and it's really a hard thing to hear, and people get defensive when they hear that. But if that person can't keep their wife in a good relationship, in a good standing, right? If they can't stay in a good standing with their wife, like if they cheat on their wife, or if they can't keep their wife in a relationship with God, and they can't be a good leader, a good husband that leads the woman closer to Christ instead of further away from her husband, then that person should not be leading a church. Let's go ahead and read this passage in Corinthians. I'll just start where I highlighted. For the wife does not have authority over her. Oh, I'm on the wrong screen. Hold on, y'all can't see what I'm. Okay. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Unrelated, but it's part of the passage. Now, as a concession, not a command, I say this: I wish that all were as myself, but each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. Okay. To the unmarried and the widows, I say that it is good for them to remain single as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry. For it is better to marry than to burn with passion. To the married, I give this charge. Here we go. Not I, but the Lord. So he clarifies here. The wife should not separate from her husband. But if she does, she should remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband. So Jesus gave us grounds for divorce. But even here, God is saying, even if you shouldn't. But if you do, like if, one of these two things happens and you do remain unmarried, you should not get remarried. Or else, go back to the husband. And then, right, it doesn't say, it kind of gives this elaboration for the wife, but then for the husband, what does it say? And the husband should not divorce his wife. It's simple, it's straightforward. You shouldn't do it. It is very, very offensive to God. It distorts the image of God and his relationship with his church. It is a horrible, terrible thing. It's simple. Don't do it. If any brother has a wife, to the rest I say, not I, not the Lord. So this is Paul putting his input on. This is about staying with the partner. Anyway, this is really good. But the point is, the point that I want to make is that death is the only thing that severs the marriage bond. And again, I don't even know what scriptures I've pulled that from. I'm not going to go look into that or whatever. This is a last minute thing. I'm going to leave in a couple minutes. Look at my new iPad case. I got a green one. I work for Green Country Pest Control, so I got a green one. Anyway, death is not what severs the marriage bond. And a lot of people think, maybe they don't think this, but they live like this. They live as if, okay, my wife cheated on me. My wife was an unbeliever and she left me. Or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and get remarried right now. Right? So the unbeliever part, whatever, I'm not too versed in like remarriage regarding that situation. So I'm not going to comment on that. But let's stick with the first one. My wife cheated on me. My wife hit me, whatever it was. My wife is saying this to me. So I divorced her because it was a bad situation. Do you think, like, we all know how covenants work, right? No one watching this, I'd imagine, is like a first-time Christian. A covenant is not a contract that can just be broken. A covenant is between you and God. It's an eternal commitment, I guess would be an easier way of putting it. And you can't just, God doesn't just say, oh, okay, she was mean to you? All right, sounds good. You were in a bad mood? Okay. That's not a marriage anymore. Y'all are no longer married. No. That covenant's still there. You still made that covenant and you have to hold up your end. And death is the only thing that severs that. So I guess this does apply to that situation I was saying a second ago. You can let that person depart, right? Like he says, let them depart. You did what you could. You tried to lead them to Christ. But at the end of the day, you can't control them. But if they're a Christian, you shouldn't have to, that's not a mindset you should have. And if they slipped out of your hands as a Christian and you're a Christian, then you're not qualified for ministry. Even if this happens 2 years before you're called to ministry, you rubbed God's face in the dirt by treating your spouse that way. That was a horrible sin. Anyway, maybe it's a little bit personal of a thing. I'm saying you a lot, but really I'm saying like to a hypothetical you. I'm not talking to you. I only know 3 people who watch these anyway. But anyway, I really have to get another thing done, and I have to leave in 30 minutes. So I will see y'all later. I hope that you enjoyed this. I want to hear your thoughts, maybe your arguments, because I didn't really give much structure here. I just kind of told you what I think, and I'm not God, but I can tell you that I came to this conclusion through 2 hours a day, 60 days, 2 times 60, 120 hours, if not a little bit more, 120 hours or so of research. So I'm pretty confident in my stance. I'll have to make a full video on this one day, like an hour long or whatever, at least 20 minutes. But this was just me getting on here to talk because I don't like that it got canceled and I wanted to talk. But yeah, things are going good. Excited to have this ready to make some sales at the door. I've been doing that a little bit, and I am next week. I'm going in full shifts after my part-time work in the morning. Do a full shift of door knocking after my marketing work, and try to get some extra commission. But I hope y'all are doing good. Hope you have a great rest of your night. I appreciate you tuning in, and sorry if I said something you didn't like. Don't be mad at me. I'm just reading scripture. Unless what I said wasn't scriptural, then call me out. Alright, yeah, like I said, y'all have a great night. I am excited to do a weekly update. Door knocking sucks, but I love the marketing work, so I'm really enjoying my current job. I'll see you soon.